Hello, and welcome to your weekly planning update for Cheshire West and Chester. We're looking at all the key decisions for the week ending on the 28th of December, 2025. Let's jump right in. So, this week, a total of 26 planning applications got a final decision. As we're wrapping up the year, that number tells us it's been a pretty quiet week for the authority. But quiet doesn't mean uneventful, and there are definitely some fascinating things to unpack here.
So, what does that number actually mean in practice? Let's get a quick snapshot of what the planning department has been up to.
And right away, the numbers show a really clear trend. We've got 18 applications that were approved and only a single refusal. Then there are 3 decided under other categories and 4 that are still unclassified. That high approval rate is a really strong sign that the projects being submitted are, for the most part, really hitting the mark with local planning policies. Okay, so what kinds of projects actually got the green light this week? When you start digging into the details, it tells you a lot about where the investment and development interest is right now across the borough. The diversity here is really pretty interesting. We're seeing everything from people improving their own homes with residential extensions all the way to new commercial signage, which is always a great sign of healthy business activity. The fact that we've also got consents for works to protected trees and listed buildings right alongside changes of use for properties, well, it just shows a really balanced approach. It's a mix of personal, commercial, and heritage-focused projects all getting a look in. Now, on the other side of the coin, we have that single refusal of the week. This one was all about a proposal to remove a 1.5-meter sandstone wall over in Ness. It's often in these small, really specific details that you can see where the council's conservation priorities really lie. So, that covers the decisions that have already been made. But what's coming up next? Let's take a look at the new applications that have just entered the system and are now waiting for a decision. Just 5 new applications were validated this week. Yeah, it's a small number, but each one of those represents the next potential wave of development for the planning department to get their teeth into. And once again, the variety here is pretty telling. We've got everything from more domestic extensions to a new agricultural storage building and even a proposal for residential caravans. It's a great reminder that development isn't always about massive projects. It's about serving a whole range of community and economic needs. Okay, let's step back from those individual applications for a moment and look at some of the bigger planning news that's directly impacting residents right here in our area. So, Cheshire Live is reporting on a pretty significant new initiative from the council. They're actually asking for public input on a new strategy for green spaces, which means residents get a direct say in the future of their local parks and public areas. So why does this matter? Well, the strategy is all about improving our access to nature and boosting biodiversity, especially in the more built-up urban areas. The council is going to be holding public consultations, so if this is something you're passionate about, it is an absolutely key opportunity to make your voice heard. To really understand what's happening locally, you have to look at the wider context. So let's see how national and regional news might be shaping the planning decisions that are just around the corner. And this is a big one coming from the planning portal. The government has just announced a new wave of funding, and it's all dedicated to regenerating brownfield sites. We're talking about previously developed land that's maybe sitting empty or just isn't being used right now. The goal here is really twofold. First, to boost the delivery of much-needed affordable housing, and second, to protect our valuable greenbelt land from development at the same time. Local authorities can start putting in bids for this cash in early 2026, so this is definitely a space to watch for some potential local impact. This national focus on housing, well, it ties directly into some very real pressures that we're seeing right on our doorstep. And that brings us to a potential housing battle that's brewing in a neighboring authority. Right, so over in Sandbach, the developer Wayne Estates is appealing Cheshire East Council's refusal of a 160-home development. Now, what makes this so interesting is that the council's refusal went directly against the professional advice of their own planning officers. This case is going to be a crucial test of how that balance between housing targets and local opposition really plays out in the region. And looking even further ahead, the entire UK property sector is bracing for some major legislative changes in 2026. We're talking about huge things like the end of fixed-term tenancies and the introduction of new mansion tax rules. This isn't just a little tweak. It's a fundamental shift that's going to impact everyone, from renters and landlords to investors and developers. So, as we close out this week's explainer, it leaves us with a really critical question. When you put it all together, the shifting national policies, those growing regional housing pressures, and the day-to-day local decisions we've just talked about, how will planning right here in Cheshire West have to adapt and evolve in the year ahead? It's certainly something to think about. Thanks so much for joining us.